Okay, this video is connected to the previous one that I have just posted, but in this video I will show the process, the formal process of the encyclopedia, which is the totality of being, becoming conscious of itself, of which I am a moment, and whoever you are, whenever you watch this, you are also a moment of this process. But in this video, I have added what I've been working on for the past month, namely to try to make it intelligible by using the categories, the classifications of the modern sciences, namely an important part of my work over the past few months. I don't say weeks because I haven't been working on this over the past couple of weeks, but has consisted in trying to make the encyclopedia of Hegel, which is the process of God, intelligible by modernizing in a way. And I thought that I had to classify all the sciences, but this is not my role. I understood this. I will share what I have understood. It's not perfect, but I also understood that by trying to achieve perfection, this is the surest way to fail at a certain moment. So I have accepted my failures, my on an intellectual level, because there are other forms of failure, but the lag, sometimes there might be incoherences. It's not be very rigorous, but I'm trying to make the writings of Hegel intelligible to potentially everyone in the long term, I guess, but at least for now, for the people with a high education, or for the specialists, the college students, the scientists, the intellectuals. But eventually it has to be intelligible for every person. But I share my part of the work on this, and I will just make a brief personal comment. I am in the process of understanding that I will have to let go of Hegel, which is kind of letting go of a burden, but when I say Hegel here, I mean the writings of Hegel, but it's also like letting go of a friend or a mentor or a father even. But I have understood recently that eventually I will be all alone, even without Hegel, I mean without the writings of Hegel. But I have read so much that I will be in a position where I will have to deal with the problems all by myself in a sense. So yeah, but it's like letting go of all the commentaries that I've made about Hegel is like letting a part of me go, and a part that I have grown to be attached to for good aspects. I must pay homage to the writings of Hegel. I will keep a few books with me, and I will use them as long as I publish video. I have the intention of publishing lectures, theoretical lectures, in the coming days, but up until then what I intend to do and what I will do is to publish step by step all the documents that I've been working on, and then I will improvise and make lectures to make my videos famous at some point, because that's the purpose. And then I will let people judge me. I will try to improve what can be improved to reduce the potential damages, and then so I will begin the presentation of the formal structure of the encyclopedia with the third part, which is the Philosophie des Geistes, then the second part, which is the Philosophy of Nature, and then I will go to the first part, which is the logic. So I pause the video and I go directly to the third part. Okay, so dritter Teil, third part of the three-part process of the unfolding, the development of the entity that people call God, is Die Philosophie des Geistes, and here I repeat what I said in a previous video in case people stumble upon this video but do not take the time or do not have the opportunity of watching the previous one. Geist is a German word which can be translated by spirit, but actually what it means in the philosophy, in the process of the encyclopedia, is the soul, the mind, the consciousness, and the spirit, and the psyche also. So there's one word for at least 4 or 5 distinct determinations. So I will not spend too much time talking about what I talked about in my previous video, which is really the formal presentation, the formally rigorous presentation of the encyclopedia. But here I have added categories of what could be called modern sciences in order to understand what the writings of Hegel mention and what they talk about, and in order to classify the sciences which are actually, one could say, a way of being, a way for being to become conscious of itself. A scientist which studies physics, the physical world acquire a consciousness of itself through the mind of the scientist, and it is true for every science. So I will show the various sciences which are contained in Die Philosophie des Geistes. So here still we have the paragraphs in the encyclopedia, and the erste Abteilung, which is the first section, is der subjektive Geist, which contains what we would call today anthropology, die Phänomenologie des Geistes, namely the theory of consciousness, and psychology. So here are the formal structure in German, English, and French. I talked about this in the previous video, but here it is more detailed. We have Greek letters, Alpha, Beta, Gamma, natürliche Qualitäten, natürliche Veränderungen, Empfindung. But here again, die fühlende Seele was present in the previous video, but here it is more detailed. So the subdivisions which are rigorously present in the encyclopedia, I will let the potential viewer read if they are interested. So yeah, and now I have added categories of modern sciences to help those who will eventually read the encyclopedia, to help them classify and make intelligible what the writings of Hegel are talking about. So in the section, the division, the part anthropology, die Seele, so I just go back up a little bit, I will show all the categories that could be classified in one of these subdivisions: natürliche Seele, natürliche Qualitäten, natürliche Veränderungen, Empfindung, etc., etc. What are the writings of Hegel talking about in ordinary language? We have climatology, namely the knowledge of the determinations of the climate, the atmosphere, but also the position of the Earth in relation to the Sun and within the solar system. So it's kind of meteorology and climatology. It talks briefly about astronomy and astrology, not the movement and the position of the planets, but their relation to human beings. So the same goes for climatology. Climatology is a determination of the natural sciences, but here it is part of the doctrine or the study of the soul, which is the anthropology, because it is the relationship and the influence of the climate or the movement of the planets and the celestial bodies, which is astronomy, astrology, their influences upon the human soul, basically. It would include what we call today sociobiology, demographics, racial anthropology, and evolutionary psychology. So all these branches of the natural, but also the social sciences. It's sociobiology, demographics, racial anthropology, and evolutionary psychology. They are the transition between the natural sciences and the social sciences in a way. And one of the taboos in the modern West is precisely to envision that the psyche of man, the social behavior of man, of human beings, may be determined by natural determinations. It is not widely accepted. That's why sociobiology, racial anthropology, demographics, and evolutionary psychology may be controversial topics, because some people refuse to acknowledge that it has an influence upon the behavior of men. Those who are fervent advocates of free will, usually they are leftist, although leftists advocate for sociological determinism, but metaphysical free will. And the right wing, it's the opposite. They say humans are biologically determined, but they are free sociologically. So that's why the left and the right are complementary on this topic, one might say. So I will just switch back up again. These categories that I've shown, they could be classified in these three subsections, basically. So that's what the writings of Hegel are talking about. Namely, in order to understand the soul of a human being, one has to understand the influence of the climate, the astronomy, astrological influences, his or her socio-biological history, the demographics of an individual, because an individual eventually is the product of demographics, of a generation, of biological circumstances, but also social circumstances, his anthropological determinism in regards to race, and his psychology as it influences and determines him or her through the process of evolution. We are biologically determined to respond to certain stimuli of our environment because of our evolutionary history. I am not a Darwinist, but one cannot understand reality, the human psyche, without taking into account evolutionary psychology, even though on a personal level I don't believe in evolution, in a biological evolution on a long scale. But anyway, then still in the section anthropologie des Seele, we could classify psychology as regards to personality traits, so the personality of human beings. Anthropology, here racial anthropology is biological determinism. Here it's more a step towards social interaction between human groups. Ethnography is a branch of anthropology. The differences between the sexes from a biological standpoint, because later we will find what one might call the differences between the genders, and gender would be a social construct, but sex, in a sense, female versus male, would be or is biological. Men versus women is more sociological in a way. So here it's the differences between the sexes on a biological level. And then physiology as regard to sleep, and physiognomy, which is the structure of the face, basically. So in order to understand the soul, what the soul is, one has to study all these determinations, and it's not the end. Then there is psychology as regard to talent. Each human being possesses a talent, a certain given talent, is good at doing something. Here also in the anthropology, all the topics that are interested for many people on the internet, YouTube channels about witches, tarot reading, divinations, etc., it belongs to the study of the soul. So the writings of Hegel talk in the formal aspect about these topics: mediums, telepathy, mind reading, psychics, divination, prophecies, tarot reading, magic, witchcraft, etc., etc. And then also it would include what we would call in ordinary language psychoanalysis, namely the study of the subconscious and the non-conscious processes at work in the brain, which are partly a result of the historical evolution of the species, but also the child, the unconscious, or sometimes unconscious for good or for bad, but the processes at work in the psyche of man. Psychiatry, which are the clinical problems of the soul, but the mind also. So here at the beginning the soul is purely biologically determined, and the more we elevate ourselves the more we progress in the process, the more the soul tends toward the mind, one might say, if we talk in ordinary language. Then the psychology of emotions, the socio-psychology of habits, namely it's the social behavior and the behavior of man as regards when he's considered as a psychology, as a social being. And psychoanthropology, it's always some sort of dubious when categories are mixed together, but yeah. And pathognomy and cranioscopy is the study of the facial characteristics and features of man and how it influences his or her behavior. So I will just briefly summarize again. In order to know what the human soul is, one has to take into account at least all these determinations in order to understand how they shape, determine, structure, influence the soul of a human being. And there are human beings in this current day and age who have had and still have spiritual experiences because they have unconsciously investigated their own soul. They have been on a quest to understand themselves, and they know some of their determinations in regards to these branches of sciences or knowledge or pseudosciences, whatever. So here's for the anthropology. Then the second part of the subjective spirit, which is the first Abteilung of the dritte Teil of the entire process. So the third Teil is Philosophie des Geistes, first Abteilung subjektive Geist, and second part of subjektive Geist is die Phänomenologie des Geistes. So I will not insist upon the small letters because I talked about this in my previous video, but here the subdivision is with the Greek letters alpha, beta, gamma, das sinnliche Bewusstsein, the sensuous consciousness, das Wahrnehmen, perception, und der Verstand, and what we call the mind in ordinary language, or the rationality or the intelligence, is der Verstand. So these are the paragraphs 422, 423. This is the analytical mind. This is what we call the understanding in English, or der Verstand in German. Okay, so das Selbstbewusstsein, there is these sub-distinctions, they were not present in the previous video because they were only the general formal aspect, but here it's more detailed. So here we have the theory of desire, das anerkennende Selbstbewusstsein, which is, this is my own translation, it's not really good, but I was not satisfied with the official English translation. So the self-consciousness which acknowledges the value of another, or seeks recognition by another, and or seeks to be approved or praised by another. So it's psychology, but social psychology in a way, and it has been classified in die Phänomenologie des Geistes. So this includes, for instance, civic virtues, patriotism, sense of civic responsibility, taking care of one's household, helping in the sports team of the neighborhood, whatever, becoming member of a political party. This is how man acquires approval, praise, recognition by participating in social life and being recognized in the consciousness of others. And this is valid also for das allgemeine Selbstbewusstsein. Okay, and now the categories that one could include, it can be more detailed. It's not perfect, that's what I'm saying. I've been working on this for many weeks, but now I've understood that I have to share my knowledge, even if it's far from being satisfying on an intellectual standpoint. But others will be able to classify themselves in a way, because they are you, whoever you are. If you are different individually from me, you are part of being. So it is your story as well as mine, but you have a different perspective. So in the part, die Phänomenologie des Geistes, one could include neurobiology. That would be the theory of how the sensuous consciousness or the perception brings about mental representation. That's a neurobiological process, partly. Philosophy, psychology as regards to motives. Okay, that's anthropo, not anthroso. Okay, I'm not quite satisfied with this. sociology, the theory of domination and work, and here I make a comment, the interpretation of Kojève, the interpretation of Hegel by Kojève focuses on mostly this aspect, domination and work. This is, those who are vaguely familiar with Hegelian studies know that Kojève, supposedly a French philosopher of the 1930s and 40s, I think, became famous by commenting Hegel in a Marxist perspective and talking about domination, work, the relationship between the master and the servant, recognition, etc. So for many decades, these determinations have been the way Marxists have interpreted Hegel. So here, this part of the encyclopedia is not very clear because it mixes neurobiology in a way, psychology, philosophy, sociology. It's not very clear for a modern mind. It's difficult, but yeah, I try to clarify. Okay, then the third part of the subjective Geist, the psychology der Geist. So here, the more detailed, the theoretical Geist, we have Anschauung, which is intuition, not in the sense of in the ordinary sense. It's in the German philosophical sense, namely the perception of a spatially and temporally determined object which is external to the perceiving subject. I simplify to the utmost. That's the definition given by Kant. Die Vorstellung, which is representation, and here we have insight or recollection, the faculty or power of imagination, and memory. So these are the various faculties of the psyche from the perspective of the theoretical Geist: intuition, representation, insight, imagination, memory, and thought, which is partly der Verstand. Okay, then we have the practical Geist. The subdivisions are the practical feeling, namely the feeling of what one ought to do, what is right to do, the idea that one have to collaborate with others, share one's knowledge. So the reason why, I will illustrate the reason why I'm making this video is partly because I am determined by a sense of practical feeling, das praktische Gefühl, and I have the feeling, I've had the feeling inside my soul, inside my psyche, that I had to share. So that's quite comical because I understand this determinism. Yeah. Tendency and free will, and die Glückseligkeit would be delight, bliss, joy, etc. Okay, so here are the categories that could be incorporated in the process that I have just showed. I will not show again. You have had the time to see if you are interested. There are here more general categories like communication, and under the category of communication one could classify semiotics, which is the theory of signs, linguistics, grammar, and body language. So these are all modes of communicating thoughts, emotions, feelings that humans have. So grammar, every student who goes to junior high school or even primary school, or they study grammar, and I will go back up, grammar could be classified in I think it's somewhere in die Vorstellung, das Denken, or Einbildungskraft, something like that, whatever. So that's why the encyclopedia may seem completely unintelligible, but when one understands that it includes a doctrine, a discipline of the sciences, it's not strictly speaking a science, it's more a theory, one might say. But grammar and body language are included within the encyclopedia. That's why the encyclopedia is about the process of being, and since everything is included within the encyclopedia eventually. Yeah. And then psychology, the various determinations of psychology. We have imagination, memory, and IQ and intelligence. So for instance, if it's not clear, okay, my English here is not very clear, I apologize, but in case that if it is not very clear, someone like Jordan Peterson, who makes videos almost every day, in order to understand what Jordan Peterson is in the process of becoming conscious of itself, he is a psychologist, but he also, here I will just make a brief comment quickly, he also has natural determinations, sociobiological, racial, anthropological, physiological, magical, I don't know, maybe, psychoanalytical, etc., etc. But what he talks about most of the time are determinations of psychology, namely what I've just showed, memory, IQ, imagination, but also the previous determinations, emotions, behavior, habits, practical feeling, etc., etc. So here with das Denken, it's an aspect of logic. So we find logic at the beginning of the process, but also in a moment of the theory of the psyche, which thinks itself and thinks the object, which is the world. And here again, psychology, we have ethics, tendencies, the psychology of emotions, and intelligence at large. So all these determinations, branches of the social sciences can be and have to be included eventually within the encyclopedia, basically. But these are very the broadest categories. It can be subdivided as accurately as necessary, so to speak. But I will not do it myself because I have other things to work on. But yeah. So now, zweite Abteilung of the dritter Teil of the encyclopedia, namely objective Geist. I have explained in my previous video in a very formal way what this is all about, so I will not repeat. Here you can see the categories. And now translated, what das Recht, which I'm not here, I do not master the English language well enough to know exactly what's the difference between law, right, and legislation, but I understand das Recht and the French word, but I don't know if law is really the appropriate term, but yeah. So das Recht, which would be law or legislation, might include law from an individual perspective, so individual rights, because later in Sittlichkeit and the state we have collective rights in a way, but individual rights can only exist within a social context, within a collective, but there are the rights of the individual and the rights of, or the duties towards the community in a way. So here it's individual rights, property rights, contracts. Here I have included money here because money depends partly on law and legislation. So this can be corrected if people disagree with that. They can classify this somewhere else. Finance as well, crime, mafias and gangs, and natural rights. So the theory of natural rights. So this is what the division about das Recht talks about. In Anglo-Saxon countries, law, property rights, contracts, they are fundamental determinations of the public life. I mean, in most democratic societies, but the Anglo-Saxon historically have had a strong emphasis upon the rights of the individual against the potential oppressive influence of society. But if you study logic, you realize that society, it's a totality composed of many individuals, so it's complex, but I will not talk about this now, but yeah, okay, I continue. Here, die Moralität, which is morality, it would include behavior, responsibility, ethics, good and evil, and the debates. To illustrate the debates that Westerners have daily in the news, on the internet, about social justice warriors, anti-racism, cancel culture, political correctness, etc., etc., they have to be classified in morality, because this is how Westerners envision what is morally right, morally wrong. And it depends, I will not here illustrate again, but it depends upon the sociological, anthropological, psychological determination of each individual. In order to understand an individual, one has to understand why he or she believes that political correctness is right or wrong, that racism is evil or correct, or why he believes that the woke ideology is beneficial or benevolent or negative. If one wants to understand any individual, one has to understand his determinations, basically. Okay. Finally, Sittlichkeit. So here we have the first part, die Familie, family, and here are marriage. So here could be included the relationships between men and women, not from a strictly biological standpoint, as it were in the anthropology, where it was males and females, but here it's men and women, and here the difference between a male and a man and a female and a woman is the transition from the purely biological realm to the social realm, but it's a continuity in a way. Because it's very difficult to distinguish, because continuity and discretion are in a conceptual unity. Here, one has to study logic in order to understand this. So, yeah, gender, the question surrounding gender would be classified here. So would be feminism and micto, but one cannot think about the relationships between men and women without thinking about the relationship between males and females. It's included within, so to speak, because every previous determination is included in the subsequent following determinations. And education, it's the education provided by the family, not necessarily it's not the instruction. There is education, it's how to behave in society, and there is instruction, it's how to gain knowledge and to act as eventually as an economic agent. So here it's more, but the two are partly mixed, but that's why sometimes it's difficult to make distinctions. Okay, so here die bürgerliche Gesellschaft, the civil or civic or bourgeois society. There is das System der Bedürfnisse, the system of needs, that which we would call economics. But it includes economics as such, but then economics can be subdivided. There are left-wing economics, right-wing economics, socialist, libertarian, conservative, nationalist, globalist economics, microeconomics, macroeconomics, management, etc. It can be subdivided infinitely, one might say. Finance, again, the division of labor. Culture, in the sense not of high culture that we find in the realm of absolute spirit, absolute Geist, like art and religion and philosophy, but culture in the broad sense of a mixture of what we would call entertainment, sports, ways of life, manners. It's a broad category. It's Bildung in German, but it's difficult. So that's why when we talk about the culture of a people, it's very difficult. It's like civilization. Civilization and culture are so vast. These terms are so vast that it's very difficult to know what one is talking about, and that's why they can be so confusing. Anyway, it can also include the system of needs, technology with the internet, robots, artificial intelligence, big data, transhumanism, etc., etc. The educational system, sociology, the determination of human beings as regards to their social status and their class structure and class belonging in a way. Marxism, in a way, is included within the system of Hegel because it includes everything. The various modes of production, which have been historically, over the past couple of centuries, agriculture, industry, services, and the media, eventually, would be included within here or somewhere else. But if one has to talk, this would be included here. Okay, then die Rechtspflege, which is the administration of justice, and die Polizei und die Korporation, which is the police and the corporation. It includes very simply law on a social scale and not strictly individual rights, the judicial system, and the police, basically. Then there is the state with the subdivisions, inner constitutional law. Staatsrecht is the right or the law or the legislation of the state, that which we call constitution in a way. Inner and outer, so inner constitutional law, outer constitutional law, which is geopolitics in a way and diplomacy, and die Weltgeschichte, world history. So the events that are being unfolding in front of our eyes when we look at the news, they are the result of all the previous determinations. history is unfolding right before our eyes. That's why I've been studying Hegel for the past 5 months, because the writings of Hegel, because I'm trying to understand what is happening. And now I've reached a point where I've understood that I understand more on certain aspects than most people. I understand less on many aspects, but yeah, that's why I've taken the decision to simply let go of my formal knowledge and not to apply all the knowing that I have gathered, and that's what I will do in the coming days. So this part, this aspect, the state, includes the constitution, justice and the judicial system, the government with the secret societies and the lobbies which influence the government, the separation of power, administrative, but the classical distinction is, how do you call this in English? Executive, legislative, judicial, and eventually administrative, etc., and military even. Politics, so the political debates, they would belong here, because in democratic societies there are free, officially free debates. Geopolitics, which include military and diplomacy, and history, which, if we are to trust the writings of Hegel, is the manifestation of God's ways, of God's providence. Let us hope that the providence of God aims at a happy ending at some moment. Yeah. And finally, the third Abteilung, the third section of the third part of the encyclopedia, which means the 9th out of 9th part of the encyclopedia, part in the sense of section, is the absolute Geist, and it includes the Kunst, which is art, and here there are some forms of art, but what more could have been added: architecture, painting, sculpting, cinema, photography, literature, poetry, dance, music, theater, video games. They could have been included in the realm of culture, but if one thinks that it's a form of art, it belongs in this category. The Geoffenbachter Religion, so here we have religion, but all forms of spirituality, mysticism, esotericism, occultism, etc., etc. And finally, philosophy, which is the totality, thinking itself. Okay. I will try to... No, I wanted to go through the process, but actually it's too fast. So I will not... If you want to rewatch, you can pause the video at the moment which interests you. And I wanted to now to show the philosophy of nature, but I think it's been almost 40 minutes. I will stop now. I make one more video for tonight, because I need to sleep. I have taken the conscious decision that I need to sleep at least 4 hours, maybe 6 hours per day, even per night actually, in order to remain relatively stable. So I will still make one video about the Naturphilosophie, and then I will sleep for at least 4 hours, and I will continue to work tomorrow. Okay.